talk to you about Boeing 747s. Are we comfortable in the sun? Or
Baby in my arms, walking through the neighborhood, living in the present.
In 1967, design started on Boeing 747. First one flew in 1969. Went into service with Pan American in 1970. Qantas became an early customer of the Boeing 747. What you have here is a Boeing 747-400. The 400 series came along in about 1989. This is the first of the 747-400s that was purchased by Qantas. As part of the celebration of buying the aircraft, it was decided to fly the aircraft from London to Australia non-stop. For a very large aircraft, that is a very big task because of the range of the aeroplane. Right. So in order to make that happen, we had to do a number of things. They had to make sure they didn't have too much weight on board, which meant only 23 or so passengers, people on board. The next thing, they had some special fuel made by the Shell company that gave them more bang for the buck. The third thing is they were pretty lucky with tailwinds. But interestingly, the airplane was not started. The engines were not started at the terminal. The engines were started by towing the airplane out to the runway, and then they started the engines. So they saved the fuel of that towing process. So what was different about the 400? Well, the 400 was a fully automated, and we'll try and avoid this other group so we can remain civil. So, come on up.
Wait, is the length of the 747-400 about 75 meters?
75 meters. Yeah, I'd say that's pretty close. We'll have the stats somewhere for you.
I think this is a good benefit, bro. Let's go to Bali, are we?
It's big. Okay, so what we have in front of us here is the front of the aeroplane. So this is done in business class. There were occasions where they had first class, but this particular aeroplane was retired in 2015. The flight deck and the compartment for further business class seats, and we'll go up and have a look at that shortly. This aeroplane was retired in 2015 and given to us, and at that stage flown 4 million passengers. It had flown 85 million kilometres, which is approximately 110 return trips to the moon. It had flown over 13,000 flights and 106,000 flying hours.
We're going to Bali tonight? Welcome aboard. What's your...
I'll wait a minute. Well, I'll take it. I'll take it.
Oh, the cockpits are here. Ah. It won't fit like a lot of people in there though, but...
When the aeroplane was first designed, the idea was to have the flight deck up here, and that way you could have a cargo door opening at the front. And that was the look of the aeroplane originally, was to have a little bit of a hump or bump up the front here, but that was later extended into what you see now, which is a passenger compartment. And that was probably around the 300 series, then 400, and that was continued on to the Dash 8, the last one, which was slightly long compartment. So you can see, if you poke your head around the corner, there's a crew rest area there. You can see where the captain, first officer, which is the 400, and the earlier models. And you see the difference here is the presence of the screens. And the screens provide all the information, and they can be cycled through various modes to show different information. But over there is the earlier models, which is the dials and gauges. So there's no TV screens there.
Okay.
Analog. Yep. It has to be evacuated on the ground. The slide raft is very important, and you're meant to slide down the raft with your arms folded and your feet out in front and not carry your hand luggage with you. When you're in a plane and you're doing some work, and he actually went across to Britain to work on the failure of the Comet airliners, and he thought, wouldn't it be a great idea if we had a record of what was happening in the aeroplane before it happened, before the crash? And so he came up with the idea of using a recorder, and he said to the Australian authorities, how about we develop this? And they weren't very interested. So he ended up going to Britain, and the British authorities were interested and thought it was a good idea, and so it was developed from there. But nevertheless, Mr. Warren gets credit for inventing or coming up with the idea of the big engines were developed and designed and built. It was impossible to have an airplane this big. But what we learned in time was that you could build engines called high bypass turbofan engines.
Turbofan.
So if you look at these engines, when you look inside, there's a very big fan at the front, which we'll see in a moment. But it burns the fuel in the centre.
Yep.
That drives the big fan, and the big fan provides about 70% of the air that comes through the engine. So we $1,000.
Oh yeah.
That's the bad news. The good news is you can retread them.
Oh, okay.
So
I
you can
thought
retread them half a dozen times. It's just a matter of interest about it.
Pistons today is in the hangar. Look at that, the hangar of an aeroplane. And they're doing simulator type of flights.
A guy called Frank Whittle in Britain who's working on jet engines from the 1930s. There's a guy called Ernst von Ohan working on jet engines in Germany. This aircraft here, or one like it, the de Havilland Vampire, first flew in 1943, and it had either a Whittle or a Halford engine in it.
Delta.
And the Germans first flew their jet aircraft probably just in the late 30s as an experimental, and had the first jet fighter in service in the war years with the ME-262. So they're parallel. They're parallel in designs, although they're different kind of engines.
Yeah.
So that's really the story. So they're both in the race. They both have very early flying jets, but the Luftwaffe gets into the air with a squadron-based jet fighter. It's a flying aeroplane.
Right.
Okay. Now a question for the young ones. Okay, you young blokes. What?
Mau berangkat nih boys, so I'll see you guys soon. But we're going to fly up this one, so I'll see you soon. Jet bomber.
Jet bomber. So,
Chief
jet engines. This is called Canberra.
Canberra.
Oh, they have it on camera.
It's flying.
Grumman Company then made the F-14 Tomcat, which served in the US Navy, and it's in all the movies, the Top Gun movie, and it has exactly the same technology. This DC-2, DC-2.
DC-2.
Now, about 230 of those were built in the 1930s, and this particular one was flown by the airline, which was the airline before KLM, the Dutch airline, and the aircraft was based in Indonesia.
Why? Tell me why.
Because you know from history that the Dutch had interests and control in Indonesia.
Yep.
It was called Dutch East Indies back when, wasn't it? So this aeroplane was part of their airline in Indonesia.
I never
And
knew.
when the Second World War broke out and the Imperial Japanese Army was coming, all of the aircraft were moved out of Indonesia back to Australia. So this aircraft spent a lot of its life in
Indonesia.
So when it came back here, it became part of the Air Forces, then after the war, civilian use. So it's a very historical airplane, and we're really, really pleased to get it. Now we're going to fix it up, but it'll never fly, unfortunately, but we'll do a really beautiful job, and then it will be able to sit next to the DC-3, which is the big brother.
Yeah, big brother, DC-2.
So this one would only take about 14 passengers. So while it looks big, inside it's not very big. It is, it's a tiny little one, isn't it?